Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Ultra Lock saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now, they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I got my buddy on. It's been way too long since he's been on. I got Mr. Byron Horton from Whitetail Experience. What's going on, buddy? And well, actually, I should say Byron Horton from Whitetail Experience and then a plethora of other things he has going on right now.
All gas 2024. Yeah, man, I'm excited to be here. You and I haven't got to jump on in a bit. Although we occasionally will send texts and like, I don't know, little pump up messages. So we're not out of communication. It's just pushing the record button a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's just, man, it's when you have families, you know, and you get, so the challenging thing is like, I love all the people that are in my circle. You know what I mean? The challenging part is, you probably, get this too, just in general, is like there's a certain type of person I associate myself with most often, right? And it's usually like guys who like to get after things, whether it's physical, like, training, things like that, or whether it's like business or like family stuff, but like they're involved, and like they're high achievers, you know what I mean? Like they're good at what they do and they're committed to things. The byproduct of that is like, we often don't all have time at the same time to talk or get together and stuff like that. And so you kind of take it when you can get it. Cause I've been playing text tag and trying to figure out how we're going to get together to chat on a podcast, but you're like a Rolling Stone, brother. You're not gathering much moss these days.
Yeah. Well, at least right now, hopefully this slows down and yeah. But yeah, right now, as Chad told me, he goes all gas right now, buddy.
That's right.
But yeah, you and I have been trying to do this since I think the week of July 4th. We started like picking days out, and they'd be 5 to 10 days in advance. And you and I would either have something come up or just life, if you will.
Yeah, for sure, man. Life definitely comes at you fast, man. Sometimes you're the windshield, and a lot of times you're the bug.
but at least we didn't get together, not lack of effort and not lack of doing things, right? Like it's the opposite. Like you just said, guys are just doing too many things, or a few irons in the fire. That's right, man. But man, since the last time I actually had you on the show, you've launched 2 new businesses, and you made another human since the last time I had you on, man. So okay. I mean that's a lot, dude. You know what I mean? So you grew your tribe. That's awesome. I mean, I know I've texted you like whenever all this happened, congratulations and stuff, but formally, congratulations. And then you've launched just like in the past couple of weeks, like 2 brand new businesses, in the last, like not too many, last probably like month and a half or so, right? Yeah. Both just similar situations where I was thinking about one thing and I was like, man, there's got to be other people with this little niche need. And the G2 mounts, like, I don't think that's like anything wild, but it's one of those things that if a guy wants to put 5 or 6 antlers up in the garage, we've got a very affordable solution for you versus nothing wrong with the high end stuff, right? If I shoot a buck and I've got his match set, I'm going to buy the nice stuff. But if I literally just wanted to put antlers in my garage, and I was like, there's got to be a more affordable option. And so it was like, solve that mousetrap, if you will, with a very simple solution.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you got the garage guys. Is that what it's called? Right?
Garage guys. Yeah.
Garage guys. Yeah. Like such a good idea, man. Cause like I saw it and I was like, man, that's such a simple solution, because you're right. Like how many guys, is like the place where they spend a lot of their time is in the garage, like whether it's throwing darts or that's where their bow bench is, or they've got like a bag out there. Like I have a bag in my like archery room. Like I have a little, it's really the washer and dryer room. My wife calls it the laundry room. I refer to it as the archery room. Like, so there's a debate in the house, like as to what it actually is. But I have a small bag in there, but it's like, I'm kind of shoved off into the corner. Right. And so a lot of guys, it's like, it's out in the garage. Right. And it's like, but you're always kind of crammed for space because the garage ultimately, it doesn't always belong to just you. It's like the family's putting stuff in there, like whether it's cars or whatever. And so you're kind of relegated to a corner. And how do you maximize that and be able to, and you just came up with like a really slick, like way to do that, to be able to like hang out and have beers comfortably in your garage. Like, it's such a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I was working on G2 mounts, essentially like pre-assembling. And I was like, I'm done. Like, I had a game on the TV in the corner and I was like, oh dude, I'm going to have a beer and hang out for 5. And last season, like after hunting a lot of times, like I would have a beer as I'm like unpacking my hunting stuff. And then think about like our crowd right now. Most guys are going to tinker. They're going to like strip their gear up. They're going to make sure their broadheads are stripped. Like, I feel like especially August is the tinker, get the little fine tuned details, get the zippers on your pack taped up, organize your bins, organize some of those little knick-knack gears, maybe your second mobile set. So you're going to be spending time in the garage. It's like, gosh, if I had some bar that essentially kicked out, but also looked good. And that's where Garage Guys was like, oh man, I was like, I'm going to do that. I want one just in general. And then I made the mistake of, I showed a buddy and he's like, I want one too. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I got something here. So I basically made a fold out bar that sits in the garage. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That was literally how I started the coffee business. When I started that originally, I was just like, oh, I'm tinkering around with like roasting my own coffee and doing this. And, and then I'd have people like, hey, like, I'd like to get some of that. So that's how it all kind of started. Cause I was like, well, maybe I started a coffee business, you know what I mean? And that was literally the genesis of it. And then it consumed my life, as those things kind of do, right? Like, you always get into it and you're like, oh, this won't be so bad. It's like, oh, I can do this and I can allot this much time. It's like, whatever amount of time you think it's going to take, like, multiply it by 5, and that's probably actually closer to what reality is,
Yeah. I bought some of your Skull Brew back in the day. Because of the scouting aspect, and it was just great for tailgate coffee. I was a fan,
dude. I'm a firm believer in coffee tastes the best off a tailgate, like out of a jet boil on the back of a tailgate. I don't know if it's because it's I'm sure it's part of the environment, right? But for whatever reason, I just enjoy it more there than I do anywhere else.
Just like the best beer of the year is the beer you drink after you shoot your buck.
Dude, you ain't lying, brother. So like, testify. Cause last year, like when I saw you launch that, right, I was thinking of that because last year when I shot that buck in PA, I shot him early. It was mid-October, but I shot him early in the morning. It was like a 7:30, 7:25 shot, right? So I had the whole day just to kind of take care of the deer and just kind of enjoyed it. Like, the drag was sucky and all that stuff. I was solo, so I didn't have anyone close to me that could help. Had to kayak it out and all that stuff. But like, when I shot it, I told myself, I was like, you know what? It's super early and I have the whole day to take care of this thing. I'm going to just enjoy it and take my time, whatever. Got home, hung it up in my garage, started skinning them out, cracked a beer while I was skinning them out in my garage, did that. And I finished everything up and got everything cleaned up, and then I went out and had another beer and then had a cigar as like a job well done, like end cap, right? And dude, there ain't nothing better than that celebration. The only thing that makes it better is when you got a couple buddies to do it with. That is like the one thing. And I got that kind of in Kansas. But funny story about that was, like, we got that deer out and it was kind of late, and all the other guys were getting up the next morning to hunt early. And so like, we got everything, the deer out and whatever, in the back of my truck, and I got back to my place and grabbed a shower, and I crashed because I was beat. So the next morning I got up, first thing in the morning, I went out and like had a beer. Like, at like, cause I'm waking up hunting hours, right? Cause my clock is on hunting hours. I did sleep in a little bit cause I went to bed late, but sleeping in was like, I got up at 6 instead of 4,
Right.
And so I got up at 6 and I went outside and opened up the tailgate and looked at the beer and like cracked a beer at 6 o'clock in the morning, sitting on my tailgate drinking. So,
you're allowed to do that. Like, you shoot a deer like that too. There are no rules for at least 24 hours.
Right. I'm glad you approve, man. Cause I felt like there was a part of me that was like, man, you should wait till noon. And I was like, I ain't waiting till noon, man. I was like, I should have did this last night, but I was too tired. But
exactly.
Heck yeah, man. But so the other thing you had going on is, like, you just literally a couple days ago, as we're recording this, you just dropped your 2023 season for Whitetail Experience. I had a chance to watch it actually this morning when I was doing some stuff before I went to the gym. And like I was saying before we started recording, I always appreciate your videos. You always do a really good job. And I always appreciate like the authenticity that comes through in your stories and stuff like that. Cause it's the straight dope. And that's what I love about it, you know? So for those who maybe haven't seen it, I urge you to go watch it. But how was your season last year? Cause I know it was like a little bit of up and down. You had a lot going on. You had a lot of hunts, like you did some traveling and stuff like that, but just in general, how were things?
Yeah, like I would say definitely above average year as far as time in the woods and hunting a few different states. Um, did have a debacle there mid-November and hit a buck and just didn't. I think I hit him in the leg, and yeah, so blew that chance. And then I had two stick bow lessons where I had a velvet buck at 25 yards and he moved to 17 and I got busted on the draw. And
Mm-hmm.
then I drew on one and hit my bow hanger in January. And so, yeah, like I went 0 for 2 on stick bow encounters. And then I did have another buck at 25 yards, but even that might not have been compound kill just because it was so thick.
Right.
But yeah, like it was awesome as far as just time in the woods and some fun
Mm-hmm.
hunts. But yeah, it struck out on bucks last year, so
Right.
there is a little bit of a need to redeem myself right now.
Right. Yeah. How was because you were playing and I was following along and stuff like I knew you were shooting a lot last year with your stick bow and stuff. And my intent was to last year, and then I had some shoulder problems and stuff like that. And so this year was really kind of like February. I really started shooting. Like I went to a buddy of mine. He kind of taught me a little bit about making arrows and tuning an arrow and stuff like that. I'd never done that before, so that was all new for me. And I've been shooting it pretty consistent since February. And my plan is to take it out much like you did, right? It's like and take it on its maiden voyage this year. So I'm just curious, like, how was your first year kind of shooting, a trad bow? How was there anything different about it in hunting outside like the normal stuff? Like, yeah, your yardages are going to be different, like your capabilities as far as like distance is going to be different and stuff like that. But was there anything that you didn't think of in advance of hunting that you realized during hunting scenarios with the trad bow?
Yeah, there was two like kind of real eye openers I feel like with the stick, and one, unless you've ever done it, you don't understand like going from 10 to 12 yards when you're trying to learn that thing and then 2 yards seems like 55 or 100
Yeah.
with the compound. Like there is no
Yeah.
comparison to like a 2 or 3 yard different shot. You can be sitting there and feel super confident at like 11, 12 yards, and then you might step back to 15 and you're just like, okay, I got to focus up here a little bit.
Hmm.
So like right now, like my kill radius, like I feel really good at like 17-ish yards, but 20 seems like I really don't want to release a first arrow. I feel like ethically at 20 yards right now, but 17, like I would never hesitate right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so that was like a huge eye opener as far as hunting is concerned, and looking at setups and some of that aspect. The other thing I struggled with from hunting, I kind of read or like was looking at some of the forums and the YouTube world or whatever, but the fear of rain and feathers. So like I would love to like stalk right in rainy, nasty conditions, but I kind of had that fear of feathers being affected and flight of arrow wouldn't be as good. And I probably should just go test that a little more and just put faith in maybe the FOC world pulling me through. Because I did have Jason Samkoviak kind of say I don't really worry about that as much as I used to back in the day. So that was something that like I remember 2 or 3 hunts where I grabbed the compound due to rainy conditions, and then I had deer in stick bow range, and I was like, God, I really could benefit from shooting this deer potentially with the stick.
Right.
And then yeah, like I had always said I was going to hunt with it all of October, and I bruised my sternum like October 25th, so that kind of sealed the deal because then I couldn't shoot regularly
Right.
with it was very uncomfortable. And this year I actually wrote on the whiteboard, I said kill a buck with the stick bow. So like I'm going all in November. I think December or a miss on a buck, I will go back to the compound. But I think all of November, if I'm gonna achieve ultimate whitetail greatness of a buck with a stick bow, that's what I'm gonna do.
Right. So how did you bruise your sternum?
I was taking my brother-in-law hunting,
Uh-huh.
and I was on I went to brace a tree stand or whatever, and essentially self contusioned my chest. So I was hitting a stand, and I was trying to do and I didn't know it at the time, and I was like, oh, that really hurt. And then a couple days went by, and like I couldn't do like arm circles very well. I was like, what is going on? I had no correlation until like I put the pieces together and started Googling, sore chest, hurts to cough, sometimes breathing is discomfort. And I figured it out. And dude, it took like 2 months to feel like 100% great.
Dude, that's terrible, man. I mean, it's funny how like the smallest things, I know and this was like, should have been more obvious to me, but when I jacked up my shoulder, so how I originally heard it, and I think I've told the story in here, I actually fell like hunting, and it wasn't like a big fall. Like I was literally, in hindsight, I remembered like when it happened, because I went for like a couple months and my shoulder was just like messed up, and I was like, dang, I was like, I don't know what's wrong with my shoulder. And this was like before I started doing jujitsu, so there was no like physical reason that my shoulder should have been hurt. You know what I mean? Other than like this shoulder's been a problem. Like I dislocated it a couple times, like wrestling in high school and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of a bum shoulder to begin with. And I was like really complaining about it. My wife's like, what'd you do to your shoulder? And I'm like, I don't know, And so I finally went to like a doctor, and they took some like images of it and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, like you got a torn labrum, blah, 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 blah. And they were asking me how I heard it. And it finally dawned on me. I was like, oh wait, yeah. Like early October, rainy morning, as soon as the rain stopped, I went out to hunt and was climbing up, got up on my first stick, and then pulled my aider up onto my second one. And my foot just slipped off the top step. Like it was no like big, like I wasn't doing anything crazy. I was literally just trying to get my foot in my aider, and my foot slipped off my top step. And I had a hold of the top of the second stick that I had set. And when my foot slipped out, it kind of swung me around. Like I fell and it swung me around. I kind of caught myself before I fell, but it kind of swung me all the way around, just like completely torqued my shoulder. It was all my body weight, and then swung like my shoulder open. And I didn't even really realize it, because like it wasn't a big deal. Like I was like, all right, cool. Like put my feet back on the stick, got back up on the second stick, set my platform, got in my saddle, and I hunted, and it was fine. And I got out and like walked back, back to my truck that afternoon and whatever. And then it just like successively got worse and worse and worse. And then I finally realized, and I told my wife, I was like, I figured out how I hurt my shoulder. She's like, how? I was like, I fell out of a tree like 3 months ago or whatever. She's like, you fell out of a tree hunting and like just now going to tell me.
Yeah.
I was like, well, it wasn't like a big fall, you know what I mean? I was like, it was bad enough, I guess, to hurt my shoulder. I was like, but I didn't hit the ground, so I didn't really think about it, So yeah, man, it's just like sometimes those injuries are just like out of nowhere, where you don't even realize you did something, which are the worst. It's like when you're my age, like you sneeze and like you hurt your neck, There's that one meme that's like, I slept weird, my neck hurts, I sneezed and I pulled a rib. I'm like, one catastrophic fart from paralysis. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of like where you're at some days, But like the one, like, so I didn't mean to laugh, but I did laugh when I was watching your video, whatever. You dropped your camera and it landed in the only freaking spot of water within 40 yards, dude. So like, because like I was watching the video and I'm like, and you were kind of saying like, you were giving the dialogue of like, it's been a challenge, we'll say, right? And I was like, and I'm following along, and then you're like, and then this happens, and I'm like, ooh, I was like, salt to wound on that one.
Yeah, I feel like so two funny things. Like I feel like the smart deer hunter move was like, okay, you've walked this creek, it's dry for 40 yards, and all of a sudden you got pulled water and a couple better trails. I was like, well, this would be the place if I was a deer, I'd come to cross this thing and grab a little drink. So that's why I hunted it. And two, Curtis Zabel comes to mind with that exact shot, because one time he sent me a text or a DM or something, and he was like, film what sucks. And I was like, well, be real easy not to film that camera in that drink, but this sucks, and so I'll film it.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite parts. was that part? Yeah, so I'm glad you captured that. But so one of the things, man, and this as well as anybody, it's like when you have those seasons that are just kind of tough, there's usually like almost in anything, right? Like you've played sports, all your life and stuff, and it's like whenever you have like those real rough patches, that's like when the real kind of growth and learning kind of happens to a degree, right? And I feel the same way about hunting seasons. Like the seasons I had a real good season this year, but it was really built on like having three really challenging seasons kind of back to back to back, where it was like just a bunch of near miss opportunities, where it was like I was slightly wrong on the setup or whatever. So I'm just curious, man, when you look back and you're, getting ready for this season, like what was the learning opportunity from last year where you're like, yeah, last year was not the best, right? But, man, I learned like these handful of things that should really, help me going forward.
Yeah. So there's a few things that come to mind where I'd found something really hot, like I was hunting a hillside really good, and I think I was like 50 to 70 yards off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd figured out I feel like the kill tree now. And that just took hunting it 2 or 3 times. But I say that, and I had a doe 7 yards 3 mornings in a row, and I was like, she's going to bring me her boyfriend one of these mornings.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't hunt that, I think, on any sort of north variant. I could hunt it southerly or westerly, but I think if I had north winds, I couldn't do that hillside. I did learn one particular bedding area that I can't hunt with any sort of southern variant, but I think I'm going to hunt the bottom a touch below that, and that was just getting blown at in a given morning. So like a couple years ago, Cisco talks about like wind mapping areas, and that being I circled that as like, oh, like I don't have that core knowledge right now,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have a couple of notes just from hunting those areas and either getting blown at or dropping milkweed. And okay, I hunted that area 5 times, and 3 of those times the wind did this. I'm going to take a note. And the big hills, like nothing is 100%, but that's what I've started to pick up. I feel like in the last couple of years, and last season, I think hopefully fine tuned a few more ambush points to learn from those. What else would be a learning point?
I mean,
I look at
those are pretty. That's a really strong one, man. Because
Sure.
I think a lot of people, you know, they get. I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but they like say they find a spot, right? And there's a handful of guys that you and I both know, like across like the hunting space or whatever, that like they're pretty good to the point to where it's like they may not ever have to hunt a spot before to like really have it dialed in before they even walk in. Like they can, I don't want to say going blind, but like, when you start talking about like the Andy Mays of the world and stuff like that, like where it's just like such like good intuition. And now he does a lot of his due diligence and homework, so I don't want anyone to think that he doesn't. But a lot of times guys will get disappointed because, they walk into a spot and they don't hunt it right the first time. And I'm like, man, it takes me, to your point, like a handful of times being in a spot, to your point, like dropping milkweed and realizing like what's the wind going to do in a north wind. I got one spot that I've referenced multiple times that a north wind in that spot blows south. Mm-hmm. And the only way I ever knew that was I went to hunt it on a north wind because the access was right for a north wind, and the north wind was fine for the access. But as soon as I got to that spot and set up, it blows south in that spot on a north wind. And I ended up having a couple good encounters, but it's like you would never know that until you just go hunt it and figure it out. Right. And some of that stuff you just don't know until you spend some time there. Right. And that's like, and then and to your point, like you drop milkweed and you make notes of like how things are, what the wind is doing in certain situations that way, when you go back, and even to be able to tell what direction the deer are going to come from. You know what I mean? Especially if it's a new spot. Like I thought they were going to come from like one direction. And when I got set up there, they came from a completely different direction than I was thinking. You know what I mean? And so it just goes to show, like, until you actually are in that, like, I don't know, man, seat time, I think as I get older, just becomes more and more important to me than it probably was like 5 years ago. Like just the actual visual and experience of the spot. I used to be more wing it by the seat of my pants, and like what I've kind of learned that I need personally is like, I actually need like a visual or seat time in that spot to really kind of feel good about it.
Yeah. I've always been like, not big on the e-scouting the last like 5-6 years, because I just started being like, I need to just walk it and see it. And I think if you rewind 7 to 10 years ago, I messed up a lot. I feel like where I would only look at like leeward upper third of maps, and those are the only areas I was hunting. And now I'm much more free flow state where I'll go watch it or I'll go look at it. and determine if I want to hunt it or not. And I also let habitat dictate much more than leeward ambush points at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it plays into like what do you have available to you in like the spots you're hunting, right? Because I know for me, a lot of like local stuff for me is pretty flat, right? And so I don't have a lot of terrain a lot of times to like determine what deer are going to do or how they're going to move. And so you have to look at habitat, vegetation, like that almost becomes your terrain. That almost becomes like the things that are going to move deer around and things of that nature. And of course, like what's the wind going to do in those spots? And I think sometimes people get a little lost when they don't have those things, right? Like when they don't have like the staples, it's not thinking outside the box. It's really just taking what you have and using what is there as like the things that are going to drive the deer movement in the patterns that they're going to use. I think sometimes people kind of get caught up in like, well, I don't have a ridge here, or I don't have a knoll here to push deer around. It can be challenging, and they kind of get a little bit, betwixt with that. And to your point, it's like going in and just kind of free flowing. I love that word because that's exactly like probably more where I'm at now, is like going to just like look at it, figure it out, right? Try to think like a deer, I think most importantly. And it sounds dumb and easy, right? But like that's probably the most important thing, is like try to think like the deer.
Yeah, like in open honesty, I picked that kind of vibe up from Cody DeQuisto, where it's. I remember I asked him one time, well, where are you going to be late October? And he said, well, I don't know. And now I apply that much more too. Like, I could be walking a hillside B and see 2 or 3 rubs that are the size of my thigh. And I'm like, probably should hunt that, even though maybe my preseason, I was like, that area of scrapes over on Mountain C is a good spot to go be late October. But why have like, don't leave a great sign to go hunt a question mark is something that I kind of talk about or have a philosophy of now.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, man. That was one of the philosophies that Chad and I talked a lot about when the first year that we went to Kansas, because we spent a couple of days trying to find deer. And then we found some deer, and we were like, maybe we should bebop around and look a little bit more. And then we just basically were like, look, we should never, especially in a state that we're not familiar with, in an area that we're kind of hunting blind, don't leave deer to find deer. Like if there's deer in an area that you're in, then, and you have limited knowledge of the area, like stay there. Of course,
Dave Ebright, you remember our elk fight 2020 maybe? I literally about punched Dave in the nuts on the mountain because so I'd been on one elk hunt and not had a lot of encounters, and we had a couple encounters. We'd seen elk like 3 out of 4 days. I was like, Dave, I will fight you right now. I said, you can call every hunting mentor we have and be like, oh, we've seen elk 3 out of 4 days. We need to go to spot B. That's 2 hours away. And like, I was like, no, absolutely not, Dave. We're hunting here. We have found elk. We've seen some like racked elk. We're in the chips, but just because we had one bad day, I refused to leave. And we had a friendship talking to that night.
That's awesome, man. Well, because we do that, man. Because I think one of the things that all the good deer hunters that I know that that we're friends with and stuff like that, we're all kind of built somewhat similarly in that we like to explore, right? Like we like adventure, we like to see what's around the next corner, what's over the next ridge, right? And there's a point in time where you got to kind of try to dial yourself back on that. I'm guilty of it too, man. It's like, I don't know how many times I've walked by spots I should hunt because I was like, oh, what's over this next rise over here? And then I get over there and I'm like, well, let's go check this part out now, and I should have stopped like a mile ago, and just got into a tree, it's the same kind of idea, right? It's like, don't leave, you'll never go broke taking a profit, right? Is the old adage, right? So it's like, when you find the good stuff, just hunker down.
Yeah, didn't Mark Cuban sell Yahoo like, I don't know, 2 months before a big crash? And he talks about he lost out on, he could have made like, I don't know, 20% more. But also if he'd have held it like 31 more days, he'd have lost a lot of money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like Kenny Rogers said, man, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. That's like, that's and it's very true in deer hunting. We outthink ourselves a lot, and I was actually just talking to Dan Enfeld about this a little bit, where he was talking about, guys, chasing, the food rotation for the year and stuff like that. And he was just basically saying, like, with the amount of pressure that there is, especially in the area that he hunts, like around his home and stuff, that he doesn't really pay much attention to that. He pays more attention to, where are all the people, and then what's the 10% where the people aren't, and then I go look there, and I don't really care if there's food there or not, because the reason that they will be there is because there's no people there, so long as that area has the terrain required to hold like a mature deer, right? And I think it's somewhat counterintuitive, because a lot of people, like during especially the early part of the season, like they'll chase the food changes, right? And chase the changing season, where he's more like mature deer. It's like they're going to be where they're going to be left alone. You just find that spot and then you hunt them, And I thought that was kind of interesting, because I think, especially as early season's coming up, right? Like food becomes a big topic.
Yeah. I'm not the best identifier of some of the little micro shrubs and like stuff that becomes very palatable for like a week period there in the fall.
Yeah.
I do this with oaks even. People talk about like oak rotations, blah, 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 or hunt these, hunt this. Dude, I got to go walk in the woods and find poop under an oak tree to be like, yeah, this is probably one to hunt. Dan also hunts a state that's probably a little more hunter density than I do. I can have a decent luck kind of doing a little bit of scouting and finding the browse. And I know a buddy right now who's pattering a buck on what is goldenrod, which is kind of this like weedy thing. And he booby trapped one a few years back with that tactic.
Did he really?
He thinks the buck is in the same-ish bed of the buck he killed. He texted me this week about that, so this is top of mind.
Right. Yeah, goldenrod has great protein value, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it's on par with what you would find in, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not speaking out of school here. Whenever I haven't done food plots in years, but if I'm not mistaken, I think that goldenrod is one of the ones that is pretty high protein value that deer like. That is like the equivalent of what you would find in like in a decent like clover food plot or something like that. So,
wow. Somebody comment on the post.
Yeah, exactly.
Goldenrod. When do you hunt it?
When do you hunt goldenrod? Like,
we'll get better at deer hunting from this. We're always looking to grow.
Exactly. So, man, going back to the trad piece, like so you said like around 17 yards, and like you're 100% right, dude. Like there's that window of confidence, and you're so right that such a small amount of yardage change just is like a whole new world. And mine distance is about the same of what you're talking about. I feel real good in that like 16 to 18 range. That's kind of my sweet spot. Well, I would say like 14 to like 18, like that 4-yard window is like where I'm usually pretty dialed. Anything short of that, I tend to shoot a little bit high for some reason. Anything beyond that, I don't know if it's mental or what, but I'll step back to like 20 yards. And some days I'm money. Other days it's like I've never picked up the bow before. You know what I mean? It's not that bad. I mean, I'm on target, but it's like not consistent at all. So what's your progress look like for this year versus last year? Like in terms of like confidence and how you're feeling?
Yeah. So because I could shoot a little bit in the winter, and I would, if it was a nicer day, I'd go shoot. Plus shooting the stick bow is way more fun. Mm-hmm. But I notice right now my 15 to 20 yard, consistency is noticeably better here year two. And I'll say this, I struggled year one with the stick when I first transitioned to a 3D target versus a spot. I don't know if you're instinctive. I started that route and I haven't really tinkered beyond that. And so like when I first put a 3D target out there that didn't have a specific dot to aim at, my group size opened up dramatically and really had to. Now I shoot that 3D target a little better because I think it's got some patches of reference. Yep. I do think that's going to be a struggle point, like for when I pull this thing back on a deer, is finding that tuft of hair or looking at a shadow in the crease of the armpit. Like that is something I'm hopefully going to have to stay in the conscious mind and not just go autopilot. Yeah.
That's I shoot instinctive, and I've been shooting. I started off shooting a spot like very early because it was winter, and so I wasn't able to get outside as often. I did on like the days where it wasn't terrible out, but I have a bag target in my like archery closet in my basement, and so I would go downstairs and just like rip arrows just for like just form, like getting a good release, like making sure I'm not plucking the string and just having it feel good coming off the bow type of thing. And then I did get a 3D target early for the reason you said, because I was like, man, I got to be so focused on the spot I'm trying to hit. I was like, I need to get a 3D target so I can focus on like finding an area in a blob as opposed to focusing on a dot. I was like, because like that's the next evolution. And I shoot it okay, but you're right. Like you start to cheat a little bit because there's a spot that's getting worn out, and that just happens to be where my arrow always lands, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I started doing was trying to train my eye to like look off of it and be like, and walk to where it's like quartering away, so where I'm like, all right, now I'm going to stick it in the last rib, and it's not shot up there. So now I just need to pick a spot, and my eye will always drift left to like the area that's shot out. You know what I mean? And so you're dead on with that discipline. Like that eye discipline is like a whole different ball game shooting a longbow.
Yeah, it's something I struggled with. I've also been practicing a little bit of like some not snap shooting, but like on the ground. Like if I would encounter, that was another thing too that year one I look back at, and I started having a lot better like sub 10 yard encounters in late October, November. And maybe that's just due to hunting volume and just that picking up, or maybe I'm getting a little more dialed and hunting some setups. But I can remember going for a hunt and I'm at the base of the tree and 3 does literally walk within 6 yards of me. And I'm like crunched over this log and I'm like trying to hunt a big buck that night that I had his match set. And I was like, man, this would also be super cool if I had this stick bow and I just turned and snapshot one of these does. I feel like, and maybe somebody who's shot traditional can speak to this more, but it's almost like the encounter is a little bit outside like your control. Like Mother Nature decides if that deer is going to die that day a little bit more than with the compound.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think my goal, I should write it down just so it's like visible for me to continue to look at. But what I've told myself is that if I can get some seat time, because my season comes in, I want to say it's around like the 19th of September, if I'm not mistaken, roughly. It's like a 2 weeks before the statewide opener, whatever that Saturday happens to be. Haven't looked at the exact date yet, but my goal was to try to kill 1 to 2 does in that first 2 weeks prior to like the season opener, and just get some blood time with the longbow. I was like, if I can kill 2 deer with that, like in the first couple weeks, and just say like, yep, within 15 yards, like you're good, and have that confidence. Then I was like, I think I'll carry the longbow with me for the full season, right? I was like, but if that doesn't happen, I was like, the longbow will go and the compound they'll probably both be in the truck depending, and then it'll just be a game time decision type of thing, which is kind of cheating. I just need to like do it, but I don't know. I don't know in year one if I can trust myself 100% or not.
Yeah, no, I get that vibe.
I have shot elevated a little bit because my one buddy did say that the hardest shot to make is that like super, super close shot because you got so much more limb length and stuff to deal with, and so getting turns down, to get that shot angle. He's like, that's probably his toughest shot is that one. So I've been playing with that. I actually shoot better from elevated than I do from the ground, oddly enough.
Yeah, and like part of my system last year was I called it Comanche mode October, where I only brought 2 sticks with double eighters and a small stand, and so like I was part of that 2 sticks was like I don't want to be 20 foot up with that stick bow because of that what that does to the kill zone.
Right.
But this year, like I said, I think I'm gonna go all of November. And trust it until I miss one. If I miss one,
then it's out the window. Yeah. That's because I'm going to Idaho for elk in September. That's definitely a compound trip. Because I don't trust myself for that yet. Like that's that, and I don't trust like my setup, and I don't know enough about it to know to have 2 different setups. One for elk and one for whitetails. Like I'm not there. So I'm at least smart enough for that. But it's definitely going to make some trips with me for sure, and I'm looking forward to it because my end all be all goal is to be proficient with it enough that whenever I hopefully make it back to Kansas next year, not 24 but 25 hopefully, is to try to have success on the ground with a longbow and go
Yeah, that's like
straight.
the ultimate primal.
Yes. Like that's what I'm chasing is that. So that's why I'm like, I'm in this year. I'm not 100% sold. I just know that I need to kind of like make myself feel good about it for next year. That way I'm all in, you know, but we'll see, you know, it's a,
I like
it's
it.
a, it's a fickle, cruel woman is like is what the longbow is. But, so dude, as we're sitting here kind of talking, man, like we're not, like we're only like a month away, like by and large from people like getting kicked off. You know what I mean? So what's your prep looking like now? Are you spending a lot of time out in the woods? Are you scouting? Like to me, once that July 4th kind of holiday happens, that for me like signals like the upcoming of deer season. Like I mentally start to flip where I'm like, okay, I can start getting excited about it now.
Yeah, I do feel like July 4th is like a epic day on the whitetail calendar for everyone. But as far as like my summer prep right now, so I'm going old school this year. So stick bow, we've talked about. I'm
Hmm.
going no trail camera knowledge in season. I want to
Okay.
be like I want to be the one that kills that deer, not because I figured it out with a piece of technology.
Right.
It's just something I think I'm calling this back to the roots. The other
Hmm.
thing I'm doing is I'm gonna hunt with my buddies a little bit more, where I've kind of gone through this 8-9 year very like lone wolfish like go chase big bucks, and yeah, we hunt some places like close by or on the same piece, but you know, I think Dave and I might go to my small farm October 15th and I might hear his bow go off as he shoots a doe. And that is not a great big buck recipe on sub 30 acres, right? That's just
Right.
not.
Right.
But it sure sounds fun.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm kind of going to do that this year where I'm going total old school. I'm going to hunt with buddies a little more. I'm going to scout, obviously, and no trail camera, like, in season knowledge. Now, if I hunt a scrape and I want to like know after the season if this was a good idea or a bad idea, I'm gonna hang a camera to pull after season.
Hmm.
But yeah, I kind of want like I don't know a little bit of that mystery back into deer hunting, a little
Hmm.
bit of like kind of prove it to yourself,
Hmm.
and yeah, that would also be like a huge reward, right? Like if I shoot a buck, it's like. Dude, I did this. Like
Hmm.
me one on one with this animal, especially with the stick bow. It's like, yeah, that
Dude,
was me.
yeah, the stick bow part of it too, like adding that to it is epic. You know, the there's something to be said for the mystery part of it, man. Like, because that was one of the things that was really satisfying last year. Like, I had last year there was a lot of stuff going on. I had a bunch of family stuff going on. So, like, I admittedly, on the podcast even, mentioned it that I didn't have a whole lot of time to scout not this past winter, but the winter prior, the winter leading up to the 23 season, just because I had a lot of family stuff that was happening that needed my attention, and I just couldn't get away. And I had trail cameras out, but like again, I didn't have time with like my calendar and the family stuff going on. I just did not have time to actually go check anything, And so it was when I went into the season, it was off of historical knowledge of like these spots I know are good around these times of year, especially if like we have a good acorn drop, and I know this is really close to doe bedding, and like it was just all off of history. I had no clue what deer were in the areas. And I think that hunt that I did that I killed the first hunt I did like in the North Piece, and I had a good encounter with like I had a couple does come through, and I ended up stalking a decent 8 point. He's probably like 125 inches in the North Piece. I stalked him in a clear cut, and it got within 30 yards, and then got busted drawing. And then like 2 days later, I shot that buck in PA, but I'd never pulled a camera in there, had no clue what deer were in there. It was just all like he came in 7:15 in the morning, making a scrape, acting a fool. And I was like, I'm gonna shoot this deer, and that's kind of how it worked out. And then same thing in Kansas was like, I spotted him and then I shot him. And none of those deer that I know were alive prior. And I was like, there was something gratifying about that of the mystery behind it, of like the surprise that was really cool. And I think it's really cool that you're chasing that same kind of thing. But what was the kicker for that? Like, what was the impetus to kind of go no techno?
Yeah, well, I mean, if anybody follows me, I'm not the biggest advocate for like the drones and the cell cams
Hmm.
and a lot of the technology where I'm definitely afraid of like my son's generation. Like they won't go look at deer poop on the ground because it's like, oh
Mm.
yeah, we got all these advancements of my drone reports, my cell cams, and the other thing is like, dude, I really like Andy May, and he's always trying to be a better hunter. He talks about that a ton, and I'm like, maybe like an aspect to being a really good hunter is like figuring things out without the tech.
Hmm.
You know, literally going on woodsmanship, going on your off season scouting plus your in season scouting plus decision making,
Hmm.
and it's one of those things that I was like, yeah, do you still got it? Do you still think you have those skills and abilities? Because that's like the ultimate. I feel like if we would rewind time, and hunting is a very primal thing we enjoy, a pastime. Like the good hunters would be the guys we'd send out into the woods from our tribe that could figure out what the deer are doing that day to provide food for the table. And they would have gained that experience from actually hunting deer and being able to make an in-field decision based on
Hmm.
what they were looking at or the vibe they were getting. And so, yeah, like I'm back to the roots.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Do you think, I'm curious, because look, I love trail camera pictures, right? I think anybody, like, we all like to look at big bucks, like we like to get velvet bucks on camera and stuff like that, but I will say there's a little bit of, I don't want to call it stress, but like anxiety or whatever, that whenever I start getting these images or this information, it's part of why I stopped checking cameras in season. Like I don't go around and check all my cameras. Like I just don't do that. I go to historical spots I'm planning to hunt that year, or that I'm finding sign, and I hunt those areas, and then I look at my cameras at the end of the year to say like, how are deer using the area? So I just better know like their patterns and how they're behaving and stuff like that. But there was a level, I'm just curious for you if you're experiencing this, but there was a level of like reduced stress or anxiety in not knowing last year. And I'm just curious if like the fact that you're not running cameras, you don't have that clock in your head going, oh man, I need to go check my cameras like before this date, and I got to get out to do X, Y, and Z before this date, where it's like if you're just going, if you're raw dog in the season, so to speak, right? Does it reduce like any of the preseason kind of anxiety or stress that we sometimes get as we're trying to get all of our stuff lined up or make our definitive plans? Because it might not have like a plan per se anymore. It might just be, to your point you were saying earlier, man, you're going to free flow the season,
So, one, like that, the advantage of the cell cam is you can be everywhere at once. So like that's not as much of a factor in today's hunting as it was say 5-6 years ago. But like I was very successful at literally, okay, laying my trail camera traps and just taking the best percentage area. Now I'm going to hunt that come late October into the rut, where it's like I might have either more shooters or more active bucks in this area versus that mountain only has one. Where am I going to go? So as far as stress, yeah, I'm going to save a little time, a little gas money. But I might be sitting there November 5th, like, Mountain C might have 3 shooters and this hillside only has 1. But I won't know.
Right.
The after season data will tell me, but, yeah, it's just part of it at that point.
Yeah, that's cool, man. And then of course you're not abandoning the filming part of the technology there, right? So you're going to capture the season and stuff, right?
I think I still will film my hunts. I don't know at what capacity. I've thought about just ditching a camera arm, but still bringing a nicer camera, because sometimes that camera arm is just a pain in the ass.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's tough to get deer footage because the camera's on the camera arm, and I'm like, gosh, if I could just hand hold this, I could get really good footage of this. Let's just call it racked buck that's 60 yards out right now.
Right.
I don't know. I've danced around a few ideas, but I'll still put together some sort of film and video my stuff.
Yeah. Since your approach to the season is a little bit different, have you done anything in the off season or as we're leading up to the season any different to get ready?
Just not putting trail cams out in July, in the July-ish time frame.
Right.
Yeah, I've never been one to love summer scouting. And so like, that's never been a huge aspect. generally I'd put trail cameras out, and then June, maybe late June to August, and I would set them on like a longer delay with batteries, just to hoping that they're still running come October, November.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this year, now I might lean a little more on some of last year's historical data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't have, like, I can't go pull a card September 15th and be like, oh, there's a couple shed velvet bucks that are still on this area. I should probably start scouting and hunting it.
Right.
So I might have to, like, okay, there was this particular area had a couple bucks in early October. Let's go scout up and down that, looking for rubs and scrapes and stuff. But
Right.
that might be something I do during the season.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, it's not like you abandon all the stuff that you already know, right? That's just information that you have. Like you'll use it as you need to kind of refine your plan. Man, I don't know. Like I've had this conversation with other buddies where I've last year was probably one of the most fulfilling years that I had, and I had a good year, but it was more fulfilling because of the fact that because I couldn't get out to scout as much as I wanted to, and because I couldn't get out to check trail cameras, like it just removed all of that. And I was like, man, how nice was that to just go hunt? I stopped taking a video camera with me. Like I was just like, F it. I'm going out and I'm just going to do my thing. And there was something just kind of freeing about it, where, to your point earlier, where, when you said like, that's the mega of trying to shoot one off the ground in Kansas. Like that's the primal, with a stick bow. Cause like the more I think about it, I almost want to, like, the decisions I make seem to always now be leading me to be closer to the experience and removing the things that exist between me and the animal as much as possible. You know what I mean? And maybe my next evolution might be going, I like calling it raw dog in the season. Like,
yeah. So Clint, let me ask this: if you could paint a picture of like a ultimate buck kill,
yeah,
give us a 30-second to 2-minute like painted picture.
Yeah, so it'd be in the plains for sure. It would be with a longbow. It would be in a ghillie jacket, most likely in CRP. So nothing, like no trees. Like I don't want anything like elevated opportunities. It will be that I saw this deer from like a half mile away, like glassed him, and I see where he's at. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to make a stalk. And then once I get close enough, I'm going to kind of army crawl up on him. And he's going to be with a couple does. So I can't get too close because I've got multiple eyes and multiple sets of ears and multiple noses I have to beat. And so it's a partial stalk, but it's also a partial ambush, to where I've set myself up in the small little terrain trap that I know he's going to use. And I'm watching him now from like 50 yards away, and I know he's going to come my way. And I'm hunkered down in the CRP because it's like, chest high. If you can't tell, I've not thought about this at all.
Midday, sunny day.
This would be midday, overcast. Okay. Midday overcast. And the grass is going to be probably about waist-ish high. That way, when I'm hunkered down, like only my eyes are kind of up above. And as he comes, I'm going to draw from my knees, bow fully canted because I can't raise up because he's going to see me. And I'm just going to instinctively snap shoot it basically, and hit him at like 5 yards.
Yeah. The
like to where he's on top of me. You know what I mean? Like that is the thing that I'm chasing in like the Plain States. It's that, Yeah. I got a little taste of it this year, and now I'm just like, dude, I want more of that. So how about you? Like, what's your ultimate, and so no knowledge of this deer previously. And if you notice, I didn't say one word about how big that deer was.
Yeah.
Right. Because it didn't matter. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
So what's yours?
So I got 3 scenarios that I feel like I would really like is, I'd like to shoot another buck like on a scrape as he's working it late October, super low encounter. Something like that. I do like the late, like, let's call it, you've hunted your butt off for like 7 to 10 days, grinder of a rut, and you get that frosty morning and you just hear him coming, brah, just coming. Like I would love, like, that is cool.
Yeah.
Like, I know some people are like, rut bucks don't take skill, but yeah, that's still a cool thing. And then I'd love to do like a muzzle loader, or like mostly here in Ohio, like the muzzleloader season's there in January, but like still hunting and scouting and spending all day out there in the hills and end up like jump shooting one where you like kick him out of his bed, he runs like 60 yards and turns and looks back. And
Mm-hmm.
you're able to get a shot off at him, just kind of getting as close as to the trackers of Maine type hunt as I
Mm.
can get here locally. Like
Yeah.
I think that would be a cool way to do it. I've thought about even going to like the Virginia or West Virginia, Kentucky, and getting back in on like the Appalachian Mountains and doing like a mini spike camp during their
Mm.
like rifle season and kind of doing that same style hunt, just in
Yeah.
a much more wilderness place.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Yeah. Yeah, if you can't tell, I've not fantasized at all about that hunt in the plains like that. Like I probably think about it every day, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. It's I don't know. I get weird when I go to places. Like even whenever I go to like to Idaho or whatever, and I'm standing somewhere, and I'm always curious if other people do this too. But it really happens to me whenever I'm driving back from Montana or I'm driving back from Kansas or whatever, and I'm going through like these really flat kind of plainsy areas and stuff, and you just kind of hit certain areas where you can see really far. And I'm always kind of wondering, I'm like, man, however many couple hundred years ago or whatever, I wonder if someone stood here and what they saw. Are we looking at the same things? Like, and it sounds kind of hippy dippy trippy a little bit, but I'm always kind of wondering like what our ancestors saw in the same place that I'm standing. What experiences did they have? And in my mind, I tell myself like doing that style of hunt gets me closer to that, right? It might be completely wrong, but it makes me feel closer to it, and that's the part that I want. I wish I could go back and like, look, I like modern medicine, I like being able to live past 35. Like that's pretty cool, but modern medicine, I put that with an asterisk, right? Like we'll put an asterisk there. Just depends on what modern medicine we're talking about,
Yeah, that's a good point here.
right? But I mean, I like the comforts that we have for sure, right? But there's a component of like you lived every day in reality, in that time, whatever time period we're talking about, right? Where there was no escape from it, right? And I sometimes feel like because we can escape from it so freely with the different things that we have, that it makes reality seem more like less desirable than it really is, but it's actually pretty freaking cool. You know what I mean? I guess it's just a long-winded way of saying I really want to kill a plains buck with a stick bow.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a draw there. I struggled with that about 7 years ago where inside I wanted to go to the big woods and hunt that kind of habitat, but like the better deer population density, the more fun hunts where you'd see more deer was not in those habitats.
Right.
And I would struggle as far as like an internal debate where, oh, I should go hunt these places and see deer. And those are, sometimes a little more fun hunts.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept getting drawn to those vast places. And that's kind of, yeah, I think there's something primal there, like calling to you, if you will. And yours is the plains, mine maybe the Appalachian hillside mountains.
Right. Yeah. It's because I mean, there's definitely this component that definitely like to see deer, right? But there's also like I enjoy those mountain hunts where there's not a lot of deer, and it's for a little bit of a different reason, where it's a little bit more of mystery, to a degree. Like for me, like the plains stuff is really more so battling my wits against theirs in a different way, right? And that's an area where I think rut hunting is actually harder, is when there's that much visibility, because when we're hunting back east here, right, we can use a lot of terrain to kind of stay hidden, or put on a sneak or whatever to get up over this ridge because we know these bucks want to be over in this area embedded, and we can kind of hide ourselves with access and stuff like that. And out there, it's really, really hard to do. It's like they can see you from so far away. Like there's so many hunts that people probably blow up when they first start hunting that kind of terrain that they don't even really know that they blew up, because the deer just saw them approaching. To the light glaring off of you and where you're setting up, if you're in a shadow or not in a shadow, like, and then if it's rut, right, and you're trying to put a stalk on or whatever, man, it's like that buck usually isn't alone. It's usually got a couple does with him, that he's kind of following around. Because every buck I've been on out there, except one, had multiple does with it. And so like to get close, it's like you got to beat multiple noses and multiple eyes and multiple sets of ears, and and it just becomes really hard. I do agree, like the little bit of like the Eastern style where like you don't know what might be around the corner, and you get lucky on a cruiser might happen, right? But in the plains, like that doesn't happen very often. Like you see them because they're more visible and you can glass them, but to get on them and actually kill them is like it's harder because they have such an advantage with vision, and they have such an advantage of like elk during the rut, right? They like you got to beat a herd of elk. You don't just beat the bull, like you got to beat the harem that's with them too,
Yeah, that's a wild thought if you think about it. Like going out there, you might be better off to see racked bucks, but to kill them might be actually a little bit more of a harder to pick the right ambush point, right? That's kind of what we described. But yet I can go to a random hillside in West Virginia, and if I find the best funnel on the tree or on a particular mountain, okay, if I sit that 5 days, I might only see one racked buck, but he might actually come through that funnel and I get my crack. That's kind of cool. Like I never really thought about it. Like I always thought, oh, if you get a visual, like that should make it easier. Well, I didn't think about all the other aspects to pulling off a shot, because that's just different.
Yeah, so that was my thinking when I first went out. I was like, "Oh man, we're gonna be able to see them." Like because the biggest drawback in being in PA, is like I can't see them until they're like, because I'm hunting thick areas, and so I'm going off of the scouting that I've done, and I'm like, this spot is thick. It's got a great primary scrape in it. There's some trails that are all kind of connecting here. Maybe it's like in a thermal hut, like whatever the scenario is, right? But at the end of the day, I'm gonna go sit it, and and I'm not gonna know if there's a deer beyond 30 yards away from it because it's so thick, you know what I mean? Or some places 15 yards, you know what I mean? So you just have no clue. And so you just think, especially growing up, in PA, is like, if I could just see them, like I'd be better off. Well, you go out there and you're like, dude, you see deer all the time. You know what I mean? It's like, you're like, all right, cool. How am I going to get from here to there without them knowing that I'm doing that? And when I get there, are they going to still be there? Right. And so you got to try to keep visual on them and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just some people who grew up doing that probably think that that's easier, and coming back here and hunting mountains is harder, right?
Yeah.
And it's just what you're familiar with, you know what I mean? But yeah, I'm looking forward to the season. I'm headed to Missouri this year. Where all you headed for this year?
Yeah, I'll be hunting a few states.
Yeah.
I don't disclose as much anymore.
Okay. Nice.
We've learned some lessons, putting some stuff out in the interwebs, and so yeah, like I'll be going to a few different states to hunt just some slightly different habitats and terrains than what's offered here. Obviously, I'll still hunt my stuff that I like here with the bigger hillsides and mountains and stuff. But
right. So you doing some early season, late season stuff like for you? Well, so like what time frames are you traveling?
Yeah, I'll go late-ish October to another Midwesternish state, and that'll be fun. I'm gonna go with a group of guys, and so I'm looking forward to that. And I think actually the population there should be a little better. And we've talked about like sometimes it is nice to go for those hunts that are a little bit easier, and you're gonna see deer. Like I don't mind a little beer and pizza every now and then in my life, even though if I'm a little more regimented.
Right.
But yeah, so I'm going to do that. And then if I get some time in September, I might bounce to a state with a slightly earlier opener.
Cool.
But I won't know that until about a week out, but I can do that, right? Like that, those are states that aren't like lottery tag systems or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that hunting would probably be something a little like similar to what I hunt in Ohio. Right. But yeah, that I won't know till September. And then if I do punch a tag here, I will potentially look to go other places in let's call it the second half of November, December time period. But again, that'll be a more free float based on decision making then.
Right. So knowing that you're raw dogging the season this year, and you got a couple places you're going to be going, right? And we're not using technology this year and stuff like that. How are you framing success? Because I know, at least for me, if I'm running trail cameras, and maybe you're chasing like a crop of bucks that, you might say, hey, I've got 5 deer that I know of that I'd like to really kill. They might be in a couple different spots, but it's like, those are the deer I'm kind of going after. And maybe if there's one that shows up that I've never seen before that gets me excited, I might shoot that one. But like, here's kind of like the plan. So without that, like, how are you framing success this season, or how are you kind of establishing your goals? I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
yeah. I think you're also asking me, has the bar dropped to what you're willing to shoot?
Right.
Um, so success would be definitely shooting any deer with that stick,
Hmm.
buck doe, regardless. Um, what would be the ultimate would probably be Pope and Young Plus with the stick.
Mm.
But would I shoot a 100 incher? I don't know. He'd have to be 20 inches wide. But if he's 110, maybe he'll get it.
Hmm.
Is kind of the line definitely jumps down a touch
Hmm.
with the
Does,
stick bow.
does it become more about like maybe he's not the type of deer that you might usually target, but man, he came in and just did some cool stuff, and it would just be a cool hunt, like to cap it off.
Yeah, like okay, let's say Dave and I go to the same section or whatever, and like it's November 4th, and you know,
Hmm.
I might get a little more trigger happy just to have that moment with my best friend.
Hmm.
Uh, but like, I don't think I'm going to shoot a 4 pointer. Like that just doesn't seem on the
Right.
scale of things. I think it's kind of got to be that racked-ish buck. I'm going to put 100 inches on it.
Hmm.
Like there was a buck I was muzzleloader hunting last year, and he came in. He had a double spike side of 12 inches, and then like just like a regular 90 or 100 inch frame on the other side. I was muzzleloader hunting. I totally would have shot that deer with a stick bow.
Yep.
But I definitely wouldn't have shot him with a compound.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's yeah, as far as goals and targets, that's kind of where I'm at. It's going to be based on the moment. My inches probably drop by about 15 to 20 inches of what I'd be happy with, and the fact I didn't shoot a buck last year, I'd like to shoot a buck or whatever.
Hmm.
But yeah, no 4 pointers are on the hit list.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are safe. They can roam freely around Byron.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'm kind of similar, man, where if the stick bow goes out with me, I was talking to, I forget who I was chatting. Actually, I think it was Greg Litzinger. He came over the one day and he and I were chopping it up, just kind of BS. And we did a podcast. We shot a little bit. This is before his hand was all jacked. Well, his hand was jacked up before he had all the surgeries and stuff. And, in Greg, he's just kind of funny because I'm outside shooting the bow, and of course, like when he's watching me, I was shooting like hot garbage. It's like I was shooting great, like leading up to that until he started watching me, and then it was terrible. And so he just goes, yeah. So you gonna chase big ones with this, or you gonna shoot anything that comes by? Like what's it?
That's a pretty good Greg PS. That was pretty good. The little cadence and the tone,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's because he said it just like yeah, he did that thing where he just kind of like mumbles it to you, Greg, we love you, buddy. And I had thought about that, and then he and I did a podcast and we were looking at some like trail camera pictures because I had just kind of at that point finished pulling all my cameras out and had like all the images from the previous year. And there was a spot that had a couple really good deer that I might hunt this year. And we're kind of going through. He's like, would you shoot that one with stick? I'm like, dude, I was like, any of those would get killed with a stick bow. It's like, I was like, any of those show up and I'm in that area. I was like, I don't know if they're there this year or not because I won't check that camera. But maybe if I go hunt that spot, but that'd be the only time I go in. I was like, but yeah, any one of those would get it, and they were probably, there was one that was in there that was a hammer that was probably in like the 30s, like
Yeah.
he was a real good buck for this area.
Does your standards change out of state hunt versus in state hunt?
They do. Um,
In what way? Are you a little more trigger happy out of state, or are you like, oh no, this place could have a giant? And it may be a change of state to state.
yeah, it changes state to state. It depends on what I'm seeing. So, for example, like the Kansas trip, like I was like, 130 inches and I'll shoot it. You know what I mean? Like that was like the net. And I drew, I guess there wasn't any that I drew back on that were that size. I think the smallest one that I actually drew on was like 150 inches. And that wasn't because I wouldn't. So the not this year that I killed, but the year prior, there was a really big one that I was on. And he was actually, in hindsight now, realizing like how I underscored him because I underscored the deer that I shot. And so I realized that when I was talking to the taxidermist, the one that I was on the year before was pushing 200 inches. Like he was pretty close to 200. But like 15 minutes before I saw him, there was like a 130-inch 8-point that I snort wheezed and tried to grunt him in. If he would have came in, I would have shot him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like just full on. So it really kind of depends. My standards usually, are about 130 out of state. Like I feel like that's a representative, like could be depending on where, right? Like going to Missouri versus Iowa versus Kansas. I mean, you kind of take all of it with like where you're going to be and like what the potential is and maybe what you know about the area and stuff like that. But I'm typically not like a giant chaser when I go out of state. It's more the experience because I don't when I go, it's like I don't scout before I get there. So everything I know about the area is either because I hunted it maybe a different year or because I'm just going to scout when I get there. I don't run any trail cameras. I don't do anything except show up and hunt. And so with that, it's like I'm not going to be real choosy. It's if it gets me excited, I'm going to shoot it. Now I will say once I've had success in an area, then I kind of look at it and go, okay, what's the next kind of thing, right? Like just Kansas being an example, like it's not like Boone and Crockett or bust for me there now. Like after that, right? It's still, but it's like I think it's probably like beyond the 130. It's probably like there. It's probably like 150 or better because I've got a good one. You know what I mean? And so it's like I want to try to go find like a representative. Doesn't mean I need to shoot another Boone and Crockett deer there, but I just kind of up the ante a little bit. You know what I mean?
Clint, is there any sort of characteristic that you would shoot a buck if he was only like, let's just call it 100 inches, but like, let's say he had like 8-inch brows or he had like super heavy bases? Is there a characteristic that you'd just be like, I don't care what he scores, I'm shooting him? Because for me, I'll wax a 60-incher if he's like starting to get wide.
Yeah. So there was a 6-point actually in the north piece that I had hunted that if that deer showed up, I was going to kill him because he was just wide and tall and probably didn't score any more than like, I mean, it's a 6-point. Oh, shoot. I don't even know what he would have scored, but he was the biggest, widest 6-point I'd ever seen. You know what I mean? Okay. Just like, and he was an old deer. Like you could see by his body, he was definitely a 4.5-year-old, if not a little older. And just a house. And I was like, I will shoot that deer if I see him, or if I see something that's like, so I had a deer in the plains that he might have only been, if his left side would have matched his right, he probably would have been like 135-ish inches. But like he had a nice kind of symmetrical right side, and his left side, it just looked like a baseball bat with like a bunch of crap on it. And in hindsight, I probably should have shot him. You know what I mean? Because he was just a cool, funky old buck. I had him at 10 yards at one point. Well, I had him at 5 yards at first, and then he walked by me, and I had him at 10 yards, and then he bedded down at 15 yards, and he and a doe laid there for like 2 hours.
Oh, man.
And I just watched him, And that's one that I probably should have shot. But yeah, if there's something funky going on, like, yeah.
You like them freaks.
I do like those freaks. You know what I mean? I'm not going to lie. It's something weird gets me fired up. It's
right.
I like it. I dig that. Just there was one when I was hunting Ohio, like shoot, I don't know, it's probably 7 or 8 years ago, and he was a 4-point. He might have been a 6-point. I think he had brows, but he had 2 long spikes that came up off of him, right? And it had a small split at the very end of it. But his tines, like his main beams, were like the size of baseball bats. Like just the biggest, fattest antlers I've ever freaking seen. And I ended up shooting like a nice 10-point. He never came back in. But like I saw him 2 mornings in a row. And the one morning I didn't have shooting light. And then the second morning I did, and I got a good look at him. And I should have shot him probably. And he walked away. And I was like, man, that deer comes back. I was like, I'm going to shoot that deer. And then I ended up shooting a 10-point later that day. And so it never came to fruition. But that was one deer that was like probably like the smallest scoring deer that I would have like knowingly, voluntarily shot because he was just freaking cool.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. Nice, man. So we got your goal. So perfect season for Byron this year. What happens?
2 bucks and done hunting by probably like November 15th would be sweet, right? Be home for the holidays with the kids. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the ideal would be like shoot 3 or 4 deer, 2 of those bucks, 1 out of state buck, all with the stick.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the ideal. That's the high end goal there.
Nice.
But yeah, I'd be super tickled with just like probably 2-3 deer in the freezer. 1 nice buck here in the home state of whatever, and Hunt with some buddies too. Like
Hmm.
I mentioned that, so I want to kind of get back to that a little more. Um, that's kind of what I'd like to see shake out this fall.
Yeah, hunting with buddies, man. That's I haven't been able to do that for the past couple of years just because of calendars and schedules not matching up. But Chad and I are actually getting back together and hunting this year. And I'm headed to Idaho to hunt with my buddy Wilson for elk for like 8 or 9 days. And so I'm getting back to that too, man, because I don't know if it's like as you get older, man, you just really appreciate that camaraderie, and especially when you got buddies that like to hunt like you do and like to embrace the suck when it does suck. That's important. And I think we're both lucky that we have good buddies like that to enjoy the same kind of misery that we do.
Yeah, yeah, there is something to like embracing the suck together and riding in the same car and just BSing with a buddy about life. It doesn't even
Hmm.
necessarily have to be about hunting, but I think as you get older, that time period is less and less in your life because you have
Hmm.
kids, you have lives, you have jobs. When we were in our like late 20s and less kids or no kids, like yeah, we saw each other all the time, so it wasn't something like we cherished as much.
Hmm.
And now we're kind of getting to that stage that yeah, like and I think it makes you a better husband, dad, probably
Hmm.
employee because you get like the refresher that probably like we need in our lives
Hmm.
as male guys. You do need to get together with the boys occasionally. It is good for your soul and good for your mind.
Right. I'm curious, man, when you're on hunts, um, do you like balancing strategy and kind of like how to like, say you see a deer and you're like, you come back and, you and Dave are hunting together, right? And you're like, yeah, I saw this buck and I know he's in this area and I'm just, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get in there and kill him. Do you like to kind of bounce things off of each other, or are you more of a, just like, I'm going to figure this out, or or is it situational?
I think it's a little situational. Dave and I don't our styles are a little too different. I think we've
Mm.
kind of figured out. And I don't know. Is one right versus the other? I don't know. I killed the snowbuck on a move Dave thought was ridiculous. He said, Why would you go back in there? It's the rut. He's going to be 5 miles away." And sure enough, he repeated the same loop he did the day before.
Right.
So I don't know. I think too, like another aspect. If you guys watch guys play pool, I think if you play two-man pool, a lot of times you spend too much time talking to your other buddy when you'd be way
Mm.
better off to just fire your own game.
Hmm.
I think the same way with golf sometimes is true, where golf is a lot like archery, a lot like hunting. It's an individual sport, and the guy may consult his caddy every now and then. But I think you lose focus when you try and bring in sometimes too much from the outside. I'm not saying don't learn or don't call a guy that maybe is really good at hunting swamp bucks and you found a swamp buck. Like that's a good phone call to make.
Right. Yeah.
But I think a lot of times we're guilty of calling your buddy that also hunts hillsides with you and doesn't have any swamp buck experience, and you'd almost be better off to just focus in and hunt your hunt and figure it out on your own.
That's a great point, man. That's I think the way I kind of try to cut it is that Chad and I certainly bounce stuff off of each other, but he and I have very like similar hunting styles. We approach things in a very similar way, but we don't beat a dead horse. You know what I mean? Like we'll have a very kind of like high level conversation about it, and we don't get too into the weeds. It's more of like confirming, like, hey, I'm thinking of doing this tomorrow. I think he's going to do this, and it's almost like a gut check of like, dude, that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. You're an idiot. You know what I mean? Or like, yeah, no, yeah, it makes sense on what you've seen for sure. And that's about the extent of it. Like we don't dive into it too far. It's more just a quick gut check for crazy talk or not crazy talk.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
and I remember Jake Bush helped me a few years back. I was hunting a particular hillside, and I was like, "Here's how I've been accessing the area," and he drew me a different line.
Mm.
And I'm not gonna lie, it was much better route. And it wasn't crazy, like,
Right.
but yeah,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I'm not one to not go seek information, but I
Hmm.
do think sometimes, like, dude, like you'll
Yeah.
figure it out, or
Yeah. In the season, I'm less open to information, I guess. And outside the season, I'm always really open. You know what I mean? Like, because I've actually gotten on calls with buddies and like actually pulled up a map, on my computer and did a screen share and like looked at the map and was like, here's where I know he's at. Here's how I think I need to access. Or there's this group of deer over here. does this make sense to you based on like what you're seeing? Like, would you do it a similar way? Like, is there a different approach you would take, and just kind of pick their brain that way? Because once I kind of make a plan and I know what I need to do, then I kind of like to work my plan,
Yeah.
and you're the one getting all the real time intel too. So like, you're the one really is like best positioned to make new decisions, not the person who's not been there. They can basically tell you if like what you're thinking is completely stupid or not, but they haven't seen what you've seen,
So I can think back in the last couple of years, I called Justin Hollinsworth a few times because I look at my playbook and I wasn't necessarily good at hunting on a small piece, and I had a history buck showing up that was nice, and I was like, he's the guy in my playbook that has hunted a lot of similar, let's just call it size-ish pieces, and those phone calls were very value added to that pursuit.
Yeah. Who's your go-to? If you're gonna, who are your go-to phone calls? Like if you're like, man, I need to look at a map with somebody.
Ooh, I don't know if I'd look at it. Okay, let me think. That hit me out of nowhere. Who would I call to look at a map with?
We're bringing the tough questions today.
Ooh, yeah, these are well thought out. This is good podcasting hosting skills here. Yeah, I would say those two names are guys I've asked a lot of questions to in totally different realms. Jake obviously hunts a little more similar ground than I have, and I've shared some map screenshots over the last 5 years with him. And then Justin has done a lot more situational and yeah, he's given me some. Even though he's not pursued a lot of public land bucks, but he has given me some little tidbits that I'm just like, oh, I need to add that to the arsenal. I really listen to Heath Cisco a lot too.
That guy's a wizard, man. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I really look up to those 3 or 4 guys, and those would be my 3 of phone of friends.
Nice. Yeah, mine are usually pretty consistent. Like Chad and I look at a lot of maps together, but a lot of time he and I are looking at them like in person together because we'll be hunting together or whatever. I'll certainly call him and bounce stuff off of him. That happens pretty frequently. Guys I probably regularly share map stuff with and like talk to is like Greg, Bowhunting Fiend, Greg Litzner. Like he's like probably like my first call often. And he'll sometimes be at the house too, and so we'll look at stuff. And then the other one is Ryan Glitsky. I do some like I'll get a hold of him and like, hey, let's look at a map here real quick. Like the last time we did a podcast, we did that. We stayed on the phone for like an extra hour after that looking at some maps of some things I was working on. Just getting like a fresh set of eyes and a different perspective,
I'm going to add Jake Hofer and my buddy Larry as my habitat consulting guys. Cause I don't nerd out on that stuff. I just need answers quick of, will this work? And right. Those two guys get little phone calls and little texts. I don't dial into that, but Jake's a sleeper on those type of questions.
Jake is the sleepiest sleeper of killers that anyone, like, we joke about. It's kind of like a little bit of an inside joke at Exodus a little bit that, you need a big deer killed called Jake Hofer. Because that dude, he lays down deer every single year. You know what I mean? I'm like, he's one of the best deer hunters I know that people don't talk about often enough. Because he's very humble about it and he doesn't talk about it himself. You know what I mean? Like he's very quiet about what he does. He moves in the shadows, as I like to say.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, speaking of moving in the shadows, man, I got family in town. They were gracious enough to give me a little bit of time away to chop it up with you. We finally got a chance to get our calendars coordinated so we could get together. It's good to see your face, man. I hope you kill a bunch of deer with that stick bow. I'll keep you apprised of how mine goes. TBD, to be determined. But before I let you get out of here, let people know where they can find out all the stuff you have going on with Whitetail Experience and all the new stuff that you've launched.
Yeah, by all means, check out Whitetail Experience, all the common platforms there. I'd say our YouTube is a little better than average. Yeah, and if you want to pick up a garage bar before fall, maybe we'll do something, Clint. Maybe we'll say you've given me this platform. Let's go Truth 20, all of September for Whitetail Prep.
There you go.
And you and I will work out some details on the back end. But let's go code Truth 20. That'll get you like 20% off.
Awesome.
And I think let's do that. That's kind of cool. Maybe I'll do a deer hunter themed bar if a guy wants one. I did one for Greg Tubbs as a prototype. That looked pretty sweet.
Nice. So. Yeah, guys, check that out. Get your bar set up. That way, while you're skinning this year, you got a place to hold your cold beverage. Bam.
Boom.
All right, brother. It was good seeing you, man. I wish you all the luck this year. Take care of that family, as I know you do. Spend time with them. Season's coming. We're going to be spending a little bit of time away from them. And congrats again on expanding the tribe. And always look forward to seeing you out, shooting stick bow with a half naked child in the yard.
Yeah, that's generally how that works. The son is a native.
Yeah, that's right. Awesome, brother. I appreciate you, man.
Very good, Clint.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Osseo Gear, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.